As most of us are disturbed most of the time, either superficially or deeply, that very disturbance indicates that we are conditioned. So long as the animal is petted, he reacts nicely, but the moment he is antagonized, the whole violence of his nature comes out. Most of us are afraid of living as well as of dying. We are afraid for our family, afraid of public opinion, of losing our job, our security, and hundreds of other things. The simple fact is that we are afraid, not that we are afraid of this or that. You can face a fact only in the present, and if you never allow it to be present because you are always escaping from it, you can never face it. And because we have cultivated a whole network of escapes, we are caught in the habit of escape. Through an intellectual process of analysis, you may see that nationalism leads to self-destruction, but there is no emotional content in that. Only when there is an emotional content do you become vital. In seeing a danger as a mere idea, there is conflict between the idea and action, and that conflict takes away your energy. It is only when you see the conditioning and the danger of it immediately, as you would see a precipice, that you act. So seeing is acting. The moment you give your total attention to your conditioning, you will see that you are free from the past completely, that it falls away from you naturally. When you become aware of your conditioning, you will understand the whole of your consciousness. Consciousness is this total field in which thought functions and relationships exist. All motives, intentions, desires, pleasures, fears, inspirations, longings, hopes, sorrows, joys are in that field. When you are being totally aware of the whole field of consciousness, there is no friction. It is only when you divide consciousness, which is all thought, feeling and action, into different levels, that there is friction. We live in fragments. You are one thing at the office, another at home. You talk about democracy, and in your heart you are an autocrat. You talk about loving your neighbours, yet kill him with competition. There is one part of you working, looking independently of the other. When you admit time into the process of understanding yourself, you must allow for every form of distortion, because the self is a complex entity, moving, living, struggling, wanting, denying, with pressures and stresses and influences of all sorts continually at work on it. The only way to look at yourself totally, immediately, without time, is totally immediately without time, and you can see the totality of yourself only when the mind is not fragmented. What you see in totality is the truth. When you look totally, you will give your whole attention, your whole being, everything of yourself, your eyes, your ears, your nerves. You will attend with complete self-abandonment, and then there is no room for fear, no room for contradiction, and therefore no conflict. Attention is not the same thing as concentration. Concentration is exclusion. Attention, which is total awareness, excludes nothing. You can give your whole attention only when you care, which means that you really love to understand. Then you give your whole heart and mind to find out. Such awareness is like living with a snake in the room. You watch its every movement. You are very, very sensitive to the slightest sound it makes. Such a state of attention is total energy. In such awareness, the totality of yourself is revealed in an instant. If I am all the time measuring myself against you, struggling to be like you, then I am denying what I am myself. Therefore I am creating an illusion. When I have understood that comparison in any form leads only to greater illusion and greater misery, I put it completely away. Then my mind is no longer seeking. Such a mind has no illusion. Such a mind can then move in a totally different dimension. The dimension in which we usually live, the life of every day, which is pain, pleasure and fear, have gone. Which does not mean that you no longer have joy. Joy is something entirely different from pleasure. Then the mind functions in a different dimension, in which there is no conflict, no sense of otherness, no words or explanations can open the door. What will open the door is daily awareness and attention, awareness of how we speak, what we say, how we walk, what we think. That state of mind can be understood only by yourself by watching it, and never trying to shape it, never taking sides, never opposing, never agreeing, never justifying, never condemning, never judging, which means watching without any choice. And out of this choiceless awareness, perhaps the door will open, and you will know what the dimension is in which there is no conflict and no time. We are all engaged in the pursuit of pleasure in some form or another, intellectual, sensuous, or cultural pleasure. the pleasure of reforming, telling others what to do, of modifying the evils of society, of doing good, the pleasure of greater knowledge, greater physical satisfaction, greater experience, greater understanding of life, all the clever, cunning things of the mind. And the ultimate pleasure is, of course, to have God. Pleasure is the structure of society. From childhood until death we are secretly, cunningly, or obviously pursuing pleasure. So whatever our form of pleasure is, I think we should be very clear about it, because it is going to guide and shape our lives. It is therefore important for each one of us to investigate closely, hesitantly, and delicately this question of pleasure. For to find pleasure and then nourish and sustain it is a basic demand of life, and without it existence becomes dull, stupid, lonely, and meaningless. If you want to be free from sorrow, you must understand the whole structure of pleasure. We are not condemning it, or saying that it is right or wrong, but if we pursue it, let us do so with our eyes open, knowing that a mind that is all the time seeking pleasure must inevitably find its shadow, pain. Pleasure comes into being through 4 stages: perception, sensation, contact, and desire. As I observe them, the attractions, there is no observer, but only sheer beauty, like love. For a moment I am absent with all my problems, anxieties, and miseries. There is only that marvellous thing. I can look at it with joy, and the next moment forget it, or else the mind steps in, and then the problem begins. My mind thinks over what it has seen, and thinks how beautiful it was. I tell myself I should like to see it again many times. The continuity of an experience that has given delight for a second is sustained by thought. There is nothing wrong with desire. To react is perfectly normal. But then thought steps in and chews over the delight and turns it into pleasure. Thought wants to repeat the experience, and the more you think about it, the more strength thought gives to pleasure. And therefore the natural reaction of desire to any beautiful thing is perverted by thought. Thought turns it into a memory, and memory is then nourished by thinking about it over and over again. In its own field it must be efficient, but there is a state of mind where it has very little place. A mind which is not crippled by memory has real freedom. It is only when you do not respond to a challenge with your whole being that there is a conflict, a struggle, and this brings confusion and pleasure or pain. And the struggle breeds memory. That memory is added to all the time by other memories, and it is those memories which respond. Anything that is the result of memory is old, and therefore never free. There is no such thing as freedom of thought. It is sheer nonsense. So if you can look at all things without allowing pleasure to creep in, without wanting the experience to be repeated, then there will be no pain, no fear, and therefore tremendous joy. It is the struggle to repeat and perpetuate pleasure which turns into pain. You struggle to achieve the same delight, not only to your ascetic sense, but the same inward quality of the mind, and you are hurt and disappointed because it is denied to you. Have you noticed, when you have been denied the pleasure of drinking or smoking or sex, whatever it is, have you noticed what battles you go through? And all that is a form of fear, isn't it? You are afraid of not getting what you want, or of losing what you have. If you want to end pleasure, though, which is to end pain, you must be totally attentive to the whole structure of pleasure, not cut it out as monks and sannyasis do. Never look at women because they think it is a sin, and thereby destroying the vitality of their understanding, but seeing the whole meaning and significance of pleasure. Then you will have tremendous joy in life. You cannot think about joy. Joy is an immediate thing, and by thinking about it, you turn it into pleasure. Living in the present is the instant perception of beauty, and the great delight in it, without seeking pleasure from it. Some of us would say that it is wrong to be primarily interested in ourselves. But what is wrong about it, except that we seldom, decently, honestly admit it? What is a fact is that one is fundamentally and lastingly interested in oneself. If it gives you greater satisfaction to help others, you are concerned about what will give you greater satisfaction. Satisfaction in all sorts of ways, subtle and obvious, is what we want. When we say we want freedom, we want it because we think it may be wonderfully satisfying. And the ultimate satisfaction, of course, is this peculiar idea of self-realization. What we are really seeking is a satisfaction in which there is no dissatisfaction at all. There is physical fear, but that is a response we have inherited from the animals. It is psychological fears we are concerned with here. From when we understand the deep-rooted psychological fears, we will be able to meet the animal fears. Whereas to be concerned with the animal fears first will never help us understand the psychological fears. We are all afraid about something. There is no fear in abstraction. It is always in relation to something. Do you know your own fears? One of the major causes of fear is that we do not want to face ourselves as we are. So, as well as the fears themselves, we have to examine the network of escapes we have developed to rid ourselves of them. If the mind in which is included the brain tries to overcome fear, to suppress it, discipline it, control it, translate it into terms of something else, there is friction, there is conflict, and that conflict is a waste of energy. I lead a certain kind of life. I think in a certain pattern. I have certain beliefs and dogmas, and I don't want those patterns of existence to be disturbed because I have my roots in them. The movement from certainty to uncertainty is what I call fear. Beyond the actual movement, there is a deeper layer in the mind, which is consciously or unconsciously thinking of what might happen in the future, or worrying that something from the past may overtake me. So, I am afraid of the past and the future.